Should we kick it off? Say, hey, I'm Morgan here with Arne, and you're listening to another episode
Yeah, let's say
of
that.
Creative Leaders Unplugged.
Yes, go and do that.
Oh, again?
Oh, you said it already. That's fine. It's enough. Yes, once is enough.
Okay.
That was it. Yes, you are. And Alwin is on the show, Alwin Put, and I've known him for quite a long time. He is someone who, is very deeply to facilitation,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, because he wrote 2 books about it. So, that you notice that as well, because he really had to dig really deep into what it was and what it means to him, and I kind of, so his books are kind of nice. His second book is also his first book, but it's full of personal stories, it's
Mm-hmm.
anecdotes. These are stories, so that's really nice. It's about, so it's not, it's not a novel, but it's a no, so it's a business kind of book, but it's also
Yeah.
about personal stories and how that relates to the things that he's done. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. And I think facilitations can be quite lonely, right? It's just you leading a team or you and one other person. And so I always also love hearing the other stories of facilitators.
Yeah, it's lonely. Do I? Well, because
Not
a lot of.
lonely, but kind of you don't always get to hear other facilitators' experiences as much.
Yeah, you should go out
Maybe I should just talk to more people.
there. I don't know. You could fix that. No, but you're right. But and I'm just thinking that also that's true. But it's also that the typical facilitator is, and not, I'm generalizing, but in general, they're introverts.
Hmm.
So, so it's also, at least if I think about me, if I after facilitating, the worst thing, to be honest, I'm not sure if I should record this, but because people think
Brave
this is,
space, brave
because
space.
people, yeah, well, yeah, but it's also that because people think this is really nice. If they do this, they want to
Ah,
invite you after the workshop to have like dinner or something. And this
hmm,
happened just the other day. You coming for dinner after the session, and that's the worst thing.
because you're just exhausted.
I'm exhausted.
Because you've been with people all day.
You're right. I don't want to see people. Right. So I want to go away.
And then it
Even
be
if I'm like in another country, I want to go to my hotel and
yeah,
not see people.
yeah, yeah. I have the same dilemma, right? Because they're usually really nice, cool, creative people, and you have to eat, so you know you're going to be eating either way.
I rather eat alone in my hotel room. And I don't because I'm like, that's ridiculous. No, but then I end up sitting at a table with a group of people who are having fun and stories, and and I have nothing to share.
Oh,
I have nothing to say. Well, they'll ask me questions, and then all of a sudden I can just only have, and and just in the workshop, I was able to energize and make them laugh, and I was the one kind of guiding them through, and then in the evening at the dinner table, I'm tired.
we are not like this 24/7. Yeah.
It's like the comedian, right? When they say it's kind of similar, right? So, and I've done stand-up comedy,
Hmm.
and comedians always say this as well. That when they are whatever at the birthday party, and people are like, "Oh, tell me a joke. It'll be funny." They think they're funny, but they're not funny people. They on stage they are, but actually they are troubled people most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
stage is a way to express all that, and
Certainly.
right? But
Yeah.
then off stage, no, you're
Yeah.
not
Don't,
funny.
no. Yeah. I definitely can see the dilemma, the comedian facilitator dilemma.
Well, there's a big similarity because as a facilitator, to take a group through a process, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes a process of energy, kind of low
Yeah, for
energy,
sure.
high energy, right? So there's the same patterns as you have in comedy or theater. Really, there's an
Hmm.
audience, and obviously, and you don't have to participate per se. I mean, there's theater where you also participate, but you don't, as an audience, typically you sit and you kind of observe and you kind of, you're the audience. But there's a similarity to it. There is kind of this feeling of you have your antennas, like, how do people respond? Don't they respond? Do they respond? And how do I kind of create sort of energy? And you're
Hmm.
a stage personality, right? You
Yeah.
have a stage that's a facilitator has a stage personality. which is not the introvert that you
No,
are
certainly
off
not.
stage.
Certainly not. Yeah. God, that would be such a superpower if I could have my facilitator energy in all social situations.
Ah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just be, yeah. I'm just thinking that through. That could be real, very useful. No, it's a switch that you can kind of switch on in certain situations, but often in
Hmm.
social situations, it's just not a thing to do.
Yeah. And like facilitation's a bit like taking care of a flock of sheep, right? If you go to a birthday party, everybody's there on their own. Nobody needs herded, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
nobody needs her. Yeah. Yeah, we don't need this now. Thank you. Yes. I'm sorry. This is kind of slipping into the role of facilitator here. What I do feel is that I mean, so if I have to say something, so for
hmm
instance, if they say, Arne, can you kind of say something to
hmm
everyone, like a little speech or something,
Yeah.
that is easy enough. I can stand up and talk to everyone. I don't mind,
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
right? So then I go click.
Yep.
I switch it on.
Exactly.
And you're like,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
And I do it sometimes if I run into like not strangers on the street, but somebody whose face I recognize, right? Like maybe the shopkeeper from down the road. We know we've seen each other's face, but we don't really know each other. Then I also kind of switch into this.
yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alvin, he is someone who, especially, so if you want, read his books, but read his also his first book because
Hmm.
it goes really deeply into things like heart math and sort of the rhythm of your heart that kind of synchronizes with the rhythm of the hearts of other people in the same room, stuff like that. So
That's
energy,
cool.
that kind of energy is very
And
deep.
his first book's called Captains of Leadership.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because it's an angle to facilitation that I never read about anywhere else.
Hmm.
So it was the first time that I came across that. So that's sort of so he kind of he takes facilitation to another place as well. Sometimes where you're like, oh, that's nice because it's just giving you a different angle. Whether you agree with it or not, or understand it or not, is I love kind of these different opinions or thoughts or kind of another take on something that is so that I'm so used to, and then someone
Hmm.
says, yeah, but you look at it from this angle. I go, oh, wow, no, wow, this is interesting. So he opens up new doors, which I really like.
Yeah. And I've read a
Oh,
lot about facilitation, and he mentioned a few things that already like piqued my interest. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna really need to make sure I read this book.
yeah, okay.
Mm.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
go listen to the podcast.
I think you should.
All right, enjoy.
Enjoy.
You
Yeah,
can say pet.
we don't have the ooh, like the ooh sound.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's
It's
not
n-
a ooh, it's a put. Yeah,
it's
Put,
it's
put.
it's like
uh
It's like a
yeah. Yeah, it's, exactly. It's,
pet. So,
I'm
yeah.
not really fond of it.
Oh.
Okay. But
It's
then
also a literal. I mean, it's also a thing, right? A put. So a
It
lot of
is a
names are
thing.
sort of like
oh,
when you're depressed, you get into it. So
And it's the worst word ever in France, Spain, and Italy. And I already got mocked about it a lot of times.
is it
Yeah,
referring to female anatomy?
exactly. Yes, yes.
Oh.
oh
It's horrible.
yeah, I
If
never
I
thought about
order a
that.
cab or a reservation in Spain or in France, I have to use a different name. It's ridiculous.
Oh, I never
Ugh.
thought about that. Yeah, of course.
Really
Yeah,
horrible. And it's
that's
not like just a
yeah.
bad word, it's like the worst word ever.
Yeah. Although,
Yeah.
I mean, there's someone who's trying to kind of sell me something on LinkedIn, and his name is Poopjes. His last name, Poopjes, which is like little shit.
Yeah.
That's so
Oh.
cute.
That's kind of cute. It's like you go
Yeah,
like, oh, it's kind of cute.
that's kind of cute.
Right?
Yeah.
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 So, but it's also when you're a kid and your last name is Poopjes.
Yeah, that's tough.
That's
That's
yeah,
tough.
that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
tough.
Oh, I
So
would make fun of that. If I remember what kind of kid
I
I was,
definitely make.
yeah.
Well,
No
it's hard
doubt.
not to because when the
Exactly.
teacher says Poopjes, sit down. You
Oh
you
my
go like,
God. It's,
We have a new kid in the class, and he's. I know, but I would change mine. I think as a family, you
Yeah.
could change your name.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Haven't
but
thought about that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I
yeah.
also want to know the story behind like how they ended up with that last name, right?
Oh,
Pupius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, but that the story is actually last names is. We're going back into history a little bit of where I think at the time that Belgium and the Netherlands were still part of the same country-ish or kind of kingdoms, if that was a thing.
Yeah.
When the French basically ruled the Netherlands,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to organize things a little bit better because French are just like Germans, really.
Yeah.
They want to kind of organize things, and so we didn't have any last names. So they wanted to register people and where
Mm-hmm.
they lived and et cetera, and their names. And so they made us have last names. And so people would sometimes say, "Well, I'm a baker, so baker," or like my family, Van Oost, I'm from this region. So it's from There's also connected to this, but anyway, I'm from this place,
Mm-hmm.
Oosterom. So I'm from Oosterom, and sometimes they were like, that last name shit.
Yeah.
It's not going to take. I mean, we kick out the French, and they'll, it's
Yeah.
nonsense. That will never stick. So Pupius is my name.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
in
Yeah.
a way, it like speaks to their rebellious nature, which honestly, I would also be kind of sad to give up.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
true.
so
They were like,
unfortunate it's Pupias.
it's like a fuck you.
Yeah.
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 That's
But
what
the
it is.
Dutch did that, right? And we were part of it. But
Yeah.
somehow, well, that, I guess in that region that eventually became Belgium, we don't have so many strange last names as the Dutch do. The Dutch have pancake and like pannenkoek and all these
Oh
strange
yeah, it's
last names.
true.
But for us, it's like Michiels or Verstegen or and nothing really funny,
Yeah, it's
unfortunately.
true. Interesting. I didn't realize that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Huh.
Hmm. There you
You're
go.
just a bunch of cowards. That's what you
Yeah, it's true. That's true. But we had Ambiorix, so
Yeah, I don't know. It's so weird. I don't know. Yeah, interesting.
like we
Yeah,
don't know who we are. Are we French? Are we Dutch? Who knows? Maybe a little bit German. We're like
yeah.
European. Only
It's
when we
interesting.
win football, we're Belgian, but that rarely happens lately. So
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, it's interesting. But maybe we should. I
yeah.
mean, when the U.S. takes over Greenland,
Oh God.
maybe we should take Belgium.
Maybe you should take Belgium back. That would be a
Oh
good
my
time
Take
God.
because
Belgium back.
everyone
Yeah,
else would be
You know what?
distracted.
We
Belgium, yeah.
we would be like, whatever, another monarchy or not. If you
yeah.
guys just leave us alone, we don't
Leave us
really
alone.
care.
Another government is fine. We have plenty of those.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we have
Just add a layer.
another layer is fine. I'll tell you this though, and I'm really serious about this. That there is the difference. So I mean, maybe I don't know if it's still the same because I haven't really paid attention so much in the last 10, 20 years. But the music, the art in general in Belgium is so much better than in the Netherlands. There's
Ooh.
because of the I think because of the layers and sort of the
The
search for
melancholy.
melancholy search for but search for identity. There's something to it that Belgian. I mean, with music, for instance, like Deus and
Yeah.
bands like that, they could never ever happen in the Netherlands because they're successful, but they're not commercial. But they were different. They were their own
There's an
sound.
edge. There's always an edge.
There's an
Yeah.
edge to it, but also in art and in fashion and in all these things that
Yeah, lots
in
of
Belgium,
fashion.
there's a lot more depth to it than in the Netherlands. Because in the Netherlands, it's a lot more shallow. It's not that
Yeah.
deep. It's always really, yeah. We actually really would like to be Americans in a way.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
it's
true.
true. We're a little bit so our music kind of influenced by American bands,
Yeah.
and I think in Belgium it's more of a blend of all kinds of things that to us is amazing because it's amazing music comes from it still does actually, but comes from
It's
Belgium.
ironic. We have less of an identity, but more of a signature style.
Yeah,
Like you
totally.
could immediately say, yeah, that's Belgian. There's this thingy about it. I can't really put my finger on what it is, but that sounds like it's from our country.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, so
That's cool.
that's what I actually, there's an edge to it, and it's also in the it's slowly disappearing a little bit, like in Antwerp, and but there, there's
Yeah.
like also in the countryside you would find like these unfinished things, like a bridge that was supposed to go, basically they built it, and it was, so there's a bit of, and that, obviously there was a little bit more corruption, and there was a little, all that kind of stuff, like concrete mafia kind of things going on, which we didn't have. We were way more organized and kind of,
Yeah.
and
Our
just
corruption just happens in the government. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we still try
yeah.
to hide it.
We kind of, we think we're just hiding it better. I think that's but but we pretend we were really organized. No, but it meant also that there was something, or there still is, but
Yeah.
especially years ago. I mean, in Belgium, you could really find these spaces or these places that were like abandoned factories that were amazing, and and our country is more, we clean everything up and make it boring.
Yeah, it's true. We just mess it up. Like one street would have 20 different
Yeah.
style of houses.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You were like, wow, what a mess. But at the same time,
It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so
It's
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 interesting.
the strangest thing sometimes. You drive past this super designed, like a block type of house with the special materials, and then next to it like a farm type of house. It's
Yeah.
completely does not fit next to each other. But yeah, I guess we
Yeah.
just look just as far as where the border of our land is, and then that's
Yeah.
good enough.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, but it's also because and I think these are things are changing, but I mean, there are so many rules and regulations for in the Netherlands to build a house. There's no way
Yeah.
you can build another type of house next to. You have nothing to say about these things.
Yeah.
There are all these rules. So there's something about that which does something to the psyche of people, and has an effect then somehow somewhere along the line on art and expression and literature, and also it's interesting. So Flemish people obviously are always better also at Dutch than the Dutch sort of
The mean language?
the Nederlandse taal.
Yeah.
The Flemish people are always better at that because
Which is
they're
so strange. It's just because we're half French, right? I mean, we're
yeah,
supposed to be able to talk French fluently. I can't. But then at the same time, for some reason, our Dutch language, if we
really
have
good.
competitions, yeah,
You always win. Yeah, which is
it's really
so annoying.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm guessing, well, good luck with annexing us, us rebellions who mess stuff up,
yeah.
try
No,
to
we don't.
force us in the Dutch
Right.
rules.
Yeah. Okay. We changed our mind. You stay there. Stay there.
Stay there.
Stay there, please.
Here's the border. Stay there.
Yeah. So fascinating.
Well, we're already invading each other's countries. So Antwerp is half Dutch, and I'm sure that the Belgians are all over the Netherlands. So
Sure. So I live in Haarlem, right? And Haarlem is built by the Flemish people.
I didn't know.
Yeah, it's all yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah,
That's
these are,
interesting.
and listen, Amsterdam is, the reason why Amsterdam became an important and rich city was because of the Spaniards conquering, taking over Antwerp,
Right.
and then all the kind of intellectuals and the Jewish population, and they all fled to Amsterdam, and that became the golden age of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
That and slavery.
Yeah.
Detail,
That's
little detail.
well,
Slavery, meh, and
hey.
colonizing people. Killing,
Yeah.
maiming, and plundering, and looting, and slavery, and the
Yeah.
Flemish people.
And Flemish people.
We've got some embarrassing stuff there as well in our history. So
Yep.
Yes. Most countries do. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so
I don't know what we're going to talk about.
we are going
You
to
were still-
talk about.
Morgan was still going to tell me the spiel. No?
Oh yeah, the spiel. Yes.
Okay, the spiel. So a podcast where we talk about anything and everything and nothing, where you're the guest, you're the star. We will be using this is research somehow, believe it or not. But we are talking to so many creative leaders and we're noticing a lot of similarities. So then by having this collection of conversations, it then of course kind of we're able to put it in our arsenal
Yeah,
So we will,
archive.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So you will be part of the archive in this way, and we're hoping to make a book out of it someday.
That's yeah.
But it would be, yeah, more of like a generalized synthesis of all of the insight we get. But of course, when things start to happen, we'll keep you posted.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but then otherwise, I think we're recording already. Yeah, we're recording. We got your last name. I gave you the spiel, and then I can ask the first question.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, I
so
didn't prepare anything. Obviously couldn't because I didn't have the questions. So
yeah.
we'll all be spur of the moment stuff. So I can't guarantee that it will be a nice addition to your archive, but you can do whatever you want with it. You could
Well,
also do a voiceover.
just answer the
No
question
worries.
for you.
If I stop the recording, you know what's happening.
Then I know. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so the first question is, if somebody comes to you and they say, "Ah, Alvin, I know all about your professional accomplishments. I know all about your CV, but who are you as a person?" What would you say?
Wow. That is, as a first question, like already the hardest one ever. Who am I as a person? Because that has changed, obviously, over the years. Who am I as a person? Let's say that I am a person that thrives in group settings. And I guess that's also why I got so much into depth and into facilitation, why I got so much into facilitation, and why I like to spend my days facilitating workshops, building workshops, doing stuff with people, collaborating with people in general. We call them workshops now, but in general, sessions with people, trying to imagine stuff together or have me guide them into some strange thought processes, have them surprise each other. So I think that is where I thrive, where I feel the best, and what I identify most with. Obviously, you also have I'm a father and partner of my wife as well, and all that stuff. But I guess that's not part of this conversation.
Definitely,
Um,
definitely is.
I have recently discovered, and recently that's the last years, that I love writing, not because I don't know if I'm good at it, because when I work with editors, I notice that they are much better at writing and they master language much better than me. Well, the English language at least. But just trying to build a story from scratch is for me therapy. And I love it. And I love writing a story, thinking about what would the reader feel? How would they interpret this? How could this surprise them? I love that. So, but I only discovered this in the last, let's say, 4 to 5 years. I
How
haven't
did
done any.
you?
Mhm.
That's really cool because I think when a lot of people either know they love to write or they hate to write, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
like a clear divide. So how did you discover that you loved writing?
Well, I must say, when you say this, it's also a love and hate relationship because I love to sit down and get into the stories. At the same time, it's a lot of brain power that's necessary for it. Even though you're in flow, you're exhausted after a day of writing. Well, at least for me. And when I start the day, I want to create something in writing, but then also whilst I'm doing it, I also feel how heavy it is on me to just keep in that, to stay in that zone, right? So I just want to mention that I kind of personify with the love-hate relationship. How did I get there? Well, I think it's because I love reading. It might be an obvious one, but it's not just the concepts I read, but I also love to read different styles of books. And I love to see how a certain writer tries to create a certain atmosphere in the book and tries to convey certain concepts in a really signature style, and then how other authors do it. I just love how people try to create almost an art form out of writing, and as a reader I really enjoy that. But I ironically rarely read fiction books, which I should do more often. You would expect me to read a lot of fiction books when I say that, right? Because
Yeah, definitely.
And
Because if I'm reading self-help books, they're not necessarily like building an atmosphere and a narrative,
yeah,
right?
and I do love fiction books. I just somehow always choose a book where I think I can specifically learn something from.
Hmm.
Maybe it's partly because I want to spend my time in the best way possible, and I want to get something from the book that I could use in my life. Kind of like that idea of learning all the time. So I think I consciously decide to spend my time in that way. But if I then sometimes take a break and read a fiction book, I really enjoy it. But I do also enjoy at least as much how an author can turn something that's more theory into something that's really enjoyable to read. Because a fiction book, obviously, you can make that exciting if it's a thriller or if it's a murder mystery or so. I mean, but how can you make certain more theoretical concepts exciting and speak to real? So yeah, I find that fascinating. I guess it's because of reading that stuff that I felt like, hey, could I do that? And I think I've got some stuff to say. And with the first book I've written, I really felt like I want to bring this out there because it's an important message I want to bring out there. And when that feeling of being on a mission became very strong, kind of pushed me into doing the effort of writing the yeah, I think it's 200 pages. So yeah, if there's any advice to anybody else who wants to try this, make sure that you have this feeling that you want to bring this message out there because you need that to pull you through all the efforts and all the hours of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just in a meeting this morning and some researchers had found some information. So they're like, yeah, so we thought we'd write a book, but it's way more work than we realized. And
Yeah.
it's like, this sounds on par for everyone I've talked to that's written a book.
Yeah.
It it is way more work than you would think, but it is a mirror that's put in front of yourself because you write something, and while you're writing it, you're thinking, "Hey, this is great. You know, that this must be really good stuff. I feel like I'm in a flow. I'm really happy that this is coming out." And then the next day you read it again and you're like, "Oh my God, this is horrible. What was I thinking? I would never want to read this. This is boring or this is not a good flow." So you get confronted with your own writing and well, for me at least, when you start writing, it's your thinking that just gets turned into your writing and it's still very rough.
Hmm.
And reading that again is sometimes embarrassing. It's like, oh, is that how I structure my thoughts? Is that what I wanted to write? And then you have to rewrite it and get your editor involved. And that's what makes it a hard work. It's not like channeling all those thoughts on paper, is refining it and turning it into something that hopefully is enjoyable to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it also because speaking from someone with dyslexia, I do like reading, by the way, if I have the time. It takes a lot of energy. So I do listen to a lot of audiobooks, but thinking about the writing process itself. So I know a lot of people who have written books, and I remember one of them, my first friends, long time ago, who wrote a book and about a kind of a concept that he really believed in, and it's so it took him like 2 years, maybe even more, to write it, and he was working on this book like every day,
Yeah.
really,
Oh, wow.
like, yeah. So it's a big book, it's huge, and there's all these case studies in it and all these things, and he basically really did lock himself away from the world while writing his book about this specific framework he designed and he came up with. And while he was writing, by the way, this is where surface design and design thinking started emerging, and he never noticed. And because he had his framework, which was great, but it had a different language. And anyway, he published the book. And this is when it happened a couple of times with other people I know, but because then you work so hard, and
Yeah.
then you publish it. And I remember literally this happened. He published it, and he somehow, and maybe it was more hope than expectation, but sort of like it was sort of the expectation of, and now the phone is going to ring,
Yeah.
and it
Mm.
didn't,
Yeah.
and it was sort of like silence.
Yeah.
Nothing happened for a long time. And now there's two things obviously to say about this. One is it takes time for people to read the book. It was a big book, so give people some time, right? But also, and it does take so much time, because the other thing is that books are like almost forever. I mean, I have books that I'm reading now that have been written,
Hmm.
10 years ago or 20 years ago, and they make impact now, even maybe even because they were written a long time ago. You're like, oh, wow, they already foresaw this thing happen,
Hmm.
whatever. But this expectation. So what I've learned, and I haven't, Morgan and I, we haven't been writing our book yet.
No.
But the process of writing it, this is why we started the podcast, actually, is because the process, this is for me,
Yeah.
the process of writing should also be, maybe a little bit to your point, like, it's confrontational for yourself, you
Yeah.
learn, you go through it. So if the process of writing is just, a chore, if it's not, if it doesn't give you any value at all, then it's really, wow, some books obviously, they become really successful, but it takes time for these
Yeah.
things to kind of settle, right? So how do you, as an author,
Yeah.
how do you deal
Well,
with that?
first of all, I deliberately, consciously decided not to justify anything in my books. I decided that I would only write a book if it is based on my own experience and I think people can relate to it. And if they don't, then, so be it.
Well, your
No,
books, it's full of personal stories, right?
it's
So
full
it's
of
your
personal stories.
family, it's things that you go through, things you do. So it's a very personal.
What kind of,
Yeah.
what's the book about, Alvin?
Well, there are two books. One is called Captains of Leadership, which is written for people that want to learn how to facilitate meetings and workshops,
Mhm.
but is much more focused on the soft skills. So I try to avoid like your typical techniques, but rather talk about certain mindset, reading the room, like how to do that, how and what state you should be in, that kind of stuff. And then the second book is called Unlock Collective Genius because I felt in the first book, I'm directing myself towards people that want to facilitate, but maybe it's also important for the people that are in a room, meeting or workshop or gathering, that they also learn to have a certain type of mindset and state in order to get the synergy. There's magic happening with the facilitator and the group. And I wrote both of them because with the first one, I thought facilitation would solve everything. But then I noticed it doesn't. Even the best facilitators often, can't change if there's fundamental stuff not there with the group. And if the group is in a good shape and the facilitator is good, you can have this magic, which then I like to call a collective genius that comes out. So two books towards facilitators and towards participants. And it's full of personal stories because I wrote them from the experiences I had and that I noticed other people had as well. And I really wanted the books to be fun to read so that if you read it, you're like, oh, yeah, oh, that's right. So that I'm basically putting words to feelings and things that people experience that haven't been properly brought out there yet. People that people can relate to in stories and not in frameworks or techniques or methodologies. And that helped to write the book because writing from experience and not having the urge to justify everything with, you know, scientific research or stats and all that stuff, well, then you can really easily get into your flow because you're writing from the stuff you've noticed and you're just trying to relate to your reader and try to tell it in a way where they might also have experienced this and enjoy reading it. So you get into this flow. So I wrote both books in 3 months. So the first book was three
Wow.
months and the second book was 4 months. And the first book, I had this big wall, and before I started writing, I then drew, drew,
Mhm.
right? Past
Yeah.
tense, yeah, drew on the wall all the different chapters, and I then put all the topics on there, and like first high level topics, then more into depth, and I made arrows and connections, and it was this full mind map of the book, and it was already there before I started writing. I had all the stuff right in front of me, and it was actually in this room. So then I sat here where I sit now, and I'm watching this big wall, and I just started writing. And because it was all in front of me, I could easily already in the first chapter relate to certain things and relate back to that in the sixth chapter because it was in front of me. So that's a good tip if anybody wants to start writing. That helped me a lot to speed things up. And also, I was always writing with the end in sight. So I always knew what my key messages were and what I wanted to write to words. So I didn't deviate too much. That helped a lot with the first book. And then the second book, I didn't do that at all. And it also went, well, it just took 1 month longer. I don't know why, if it has anything to do with this visualization. But the second book had a lot more personal stories. And it was just a matter of finding the personal stories that made the point I wanted to make. That was the only hard part. So and this is very interesting. So if you want to bring personal stories into your book, it's hard to judge whether it is interesting for somebody else or not. You might think it's an interesting story, but that doesn't mean anybody else cares. So you have to find the stories that are real, that are authentic, and they reinforce the point you want to make. And at the same time, they have to be stories that people don't get bored of. It's like, well, what do I care? What's this kind of story? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't relate to this. But once I got those stories and I got my framework, everything else went pretty smoothly. I could always, from the back of the story, which is the start of every chapter, flow into the messages I wanted to bring and into the key points, and then end with some practical experiments. So it went pretty quick. Yeah. 3 months, 4 months for each.
Yeah, that's really quick for a book. And I'm curious because I think you have a little bit of design, at least design thinking in your background. So did you prototype? I mean, of course you have an editor come in and mark it all up with a red pen, but did you prototype or like do any type of iterations when you were writing the book?
Yeah, I had two different editors for both books, and both of them went crazy because I sent them rough drafts that for me made sense. And sometimes they were like, I don't know what you sent me. What do you really want to say? This, I don't know. And the thing was, I knew what I wanted to write. It's just the format wasn't properly there yet. And then when they gave me that feedback, I would be more cautious in structuring it and rewriting it in a proper way. But yes, I would usually send rough drafts to my editors, and they would just, based on the feedback, they would help me to then start writing it properly. And but for some reason, I couldn't immediately write it properly. I guess it's just because it's a really it's the typical creative experience. I think everybody who does creative work and knows about this, it's like it feels like it just comes through you. Like
Mm-hmm.
ideas just come in. You're not rationalizing it. You're not making associations. Doing you're not doing logical thinking. You just get this idea and you're like, oh, that might work. And then it just becomes something, and then you just try to capture it, and it goes so quick that you're just, you want to make sure you capture it, and you write it down as fast as you can, and just so, because you think this is really good, this is good stuff, where does it come from? It perfectly makes it brings the point I want to bring. But then obviously what comes out is a really rough draft that needs a lot of polishing.
Sounds like
Yeah.
then telling a story while you're drunk, and it makes
Exactly.
perfect sense to you, but everybody goes like, I think he's drunk. I don't know what he's talking about. You're like, yeah, we had this amazing thing. And this could be a movie. You're like,
Well,
okay.
what did help the creative process though was walking. Well,
Ah,
I think everybody has their own habits. For me, there's a nature reserve close by. And if I would have a writer's block, then I would just go out and walk and just keep walking until it started coming in. And then sometimes it was a flood. Sometimes it was a flood of ideas that came in that all sounded perfect. And then I just, I had to run back to make sure I could capture it, just out of the fear of it getting lost. But
yeah.
walking helped me to open the
Yeah.
gates.
Yeah. But that's sort of I mean that's when you obviously I mean I would have that while taking a shower, for instance.
Yep.
I go like, oh, wait a minute. So actually, Josephine, my wife, she bought me a notebook that I could use
In
with
water,
in
in
water
water.
Next to your shampoo.
and a pencil. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So because I was like, oh, I got this because I knew that I would forget. I will
Yeah.
totally forget. It's gone. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it is sort of this processing of the brain that kind of continues when you're doing
Yeah.
other things and walking and just I think that's
Yeah, I guess.
yeah, and I think for a lot of people, so you think about that as sort of a, in the profession as a, facilitator or designer or a design thinker, what have you, knowing that a lot of people in organizations and businesses, they have to come up with a solution, in the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
there's no moment of going like, okay, now everybody takes a shower.
Yeah.
Go for a
Yeah.
walk.
Yeah. That
Go
wouldn't work.
or yeah, go for a walk, or and then and then really kind of don't think about the
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
right? Don't think about the job. We don't do that, right? It's such a
Mhm.
weird thing that we know it works. Everybody knows it works. Yeah, yeah, but somehow in the context of business and organization, we go like, yeah, we know it works, but well, no.
Yeah. Actually, the second book, there's a piece about that. It's called Depatterning, and it talks a lot about how to use silence, especially in meetings. And I think the more that you do creative work, the easier you're able to zone out even during a meeting and let stuff come in. But if you're always like switched on and you always need to be rational and logical and smart what you say, and then it's hard to, and I call it zoning out. I don't have a better word for it, but it's like sitting there, but then taking a shower at the same time, in your mind, you're taking a shower, you're like, ooh, and it only takes like a couple of seconds sometimes for something to just
Yeah,
come in.
totally. I
And
do.
yeah,
I make drawings, but I'm
yeah, yeah,
but then
yeah,
but there's an interesting moment because when I start drawing, it helps me. I actually listen better,
yeah,
but somehow on another level or something. So I give sort of the other stuff in my brain more space because I add drawing to it. And but obviously it looks a bit weird if I'm in a meeting and I'm starting
yeah.
drawing, right?
So, oh,
And these
he's
drawings are not
He's the
about
real
the,
very
creative.
interested.
He's
Yeah,
yeah, no,
super
no.
creative.
No, it works when no, it only works when you're drawing something that is related to what they're saying. That's really good.
yeah,
But if it has no relationship
And
exactly.
you look
whatever to
over
what
this
they're
bunch of
saying,
penguins on your
yeah,
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's a bit weird. People are like, are you really paying attention? No, I actually got people annoyed by that, and I didn't realize it, and because I would have a notebook and I wouldn't show that I was drawing, but I was sort of doing that anyway because it helps me somehow focus better, and that's such a, I don't know, but doodling with people on the phone, right? This classic doodling thing while listening and making little
Mm-hmm.
doodles,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
That's something that is, I mean, it works, right? But somehow that too, we don't design for it. We know
yeah,
it works because it's human behavior and it's human psyche, and we know it works, but we don't design for it.
yeah.
Weird.
Well, I think I do something similar except for the drawing, and I think I can call it like a broad focus. It's like I'm not focusing specifically on what somebody is saying. I'm still listening, but I'm being more aware of my presence amongst the people sitting around me, and I kind of feel how it feels to sit there while I'm listening, and I'm much more in touch with the surroundings. And I think it's the same thing as when you draw, that you don't specifically put your laser focus on what somebody's saying, but you kind of broaden up your focus. You're
Mhm.
still listening, but you're not. And for some reason, that creates space for ideas to come in.
It's a kind of meditation, right?
I
In a
guess
way.
so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess so. Yeah.
So while everybody's having a meeting, we're doing meditation.
Like,
Like,
um,
what are you? I'm sorry, I'm meditating.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not
If only
listening to you specifically. I'm kind of
that would be
But
the dream, though. Every meeting you leave, you feel more relaxed and like clear-headed. God, I would go to meetings all day.
well,
well,
saying that, Rena, hearing you say that, isn't it? I mean, why do we have meetings that do not do that? Why do we have meetings that leave you depleted and tired
Yeah,
and
just a
why do we have
tsunami of
those?
information and yeah,
Because they're
logic
useless.
and
We
reason.
know they don't work.
but it's also your own mind chatter. It's not only what the other people are saying, but when you give in to the urge of immediately responding and just saying whatever comes up, you kind of stuck in your own trail of thoughts all the time. And there's this trick I always do is when I want to respond, I just don't. I just don't say it. And the more I want to respond, the more I feel like I'm just not gonna say it, and let's just see what comes out from the other people and whether somebody else says it. And it's obviously counterintuitive because often in meetings people want to, show their value and their thoughts and want to be respected for what they're able to bring to the table. So everybody almost gives into that urge, and immediately when the thought comes up, they say it. But when you do that, you easily can get stuck in your patterns because you're saying the first thing that comes to mind, and the first thing that comes to mind is the typical thing you would say. It's your pattern way of saying stuff and doing things. But if you don't give in to the urge and you just let it go away again, and you each time pause whenever you want to say something, there is this space created where you're able to bit step out of your mind chatter. And if you do that for a while, your mind kind of thinks, well, if you're not going to say it, I'm not going to bring anything up anymore. It's like, it's not, while if you
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
into it, it just starts going and going and going. It's like, yeah.
But we don't design our meetings that, that specifically, that consciously, we don't have sort of a, so, if I hear, what you're just saying, I mean, wouldn't it be great if if you need to have those meetings, right? And there's nothing, I mean, you need to, sometimes see each other and talk to each other, of course. But if you have those meetings and at least you train people in that kind of things, because what you're just saying, I recognize that, I hear someone tell a story or share some information, my brain starts looking for something that I experienced
Mm-hmm.
that relates to that, and somehow it can sneak into this, or because I have something as well, and it does it relate? Yes, and then I get my opportunity, and I wait until I get like I can actually have my moment, like I have a story that is related to that, right? And but it is actually not it's not so much is it of any value. If I would not have shared that story, would that have mattered? Could
Exactly. Yeah.
right? So you don't really think about it. So, but before you have a meeting, especially if a team that you work with all the time, you should have those conversations. You should recognize that human behavior and say, that's sort of, be conscious of that. Don't share it or don't say it, because being comfortable with not saying things is actually, but I think we grew up, especially in business, that if you are in a meeting and you haven't said anything,
Mm.
Yeah.
right, then you're, oh, you might not, yeah,
Get invited to the next one.
yeah,
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
yeah, you have no value, you have nothing of value to bring
Yeah.
to the table, so you have no value, right? So you need to say something smart,
Mhm.
right? And so you have to listen to the moment that you got something and your brain goes like, can I say, no, do I have something here? Oh, what's he saying? Right. Okay. Oh, wait, I have, sorry. Yes, I got something. Oh, right. Do we get a pause? Do we get a pause? Oh, he's breathing. I have something.
Well,
Right.
the irony is that if you hold off from saying something for a while and you let all the other people talk, then obviously you're going to say the smartest thing in the end because you have integrated all these different opinions. You've seen the dynamics, you notice what's important for that person, what that person is continuously defending, what that person feels bad or good about. And then, you could just say the one thing that is missing. So that's irony, right? Because you would think in business setting, you're most valuable if you contribute, but you're actually most value if you take your time and just
Yeah.
when you have really important something to say that you think this is missing, you bring it,
Yeah.
when the timing is right.
Or because you have been zoning out,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you've been zoning out, you actually are the one that noticed that people weren't even listening to each other.
Yeah.
And so in
Yeah.
the end, you could say,
Yes.
something I've noticed is that I don't think we actually listened to each other. We were just kind of competing with information and
Mhm.
stories and anecdotes, but I don't think we didn't go. So or you can kind of, because you're in this meta level, when you
Mhm.
zone out, but then now we're
Mhm.
getting into
Yep.
facilitation, right? So this is where
Yes, it's,
right? This is the facilitator
yeah.
that kind of steps back and kind of takes in the whole thing and goes like, huh, I don't know what you're talking about because I have no clue about all the details. But what I did notice, right, is that you weren't listening, and you were the
Yeah.
one. There were only two people talking,
Yeah.
right? And so not talking and not being part of the conversation can also really help you notice other things.
Mm.
But again, if you're not the facilitator and you're part of the team and you want to prove that you have value, right, to the team, you feel the urge of you have to say something,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and that kind of puts stress on you, which also means that probably you're not listening, because you just
It blinds you. Yeah.
yeah, you're waiting for an opportunity to say something smart,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, and I had I have so many of these moments that I had that feeling that I had to say something. Remember the time, and remember
Hmm.
remember the time when we would be on a call with clients and there would be multiple people on the phone and there was no video, and so just this kind of box. You have to call in a number, and you got into this call with multiple people, and you couldn't see them, and it wasn't really clear how many people were on the call. It could be 5 or 6, and sometimes there was around like, hello, and you were like, and the voices all kind of sounded alike because some of them were American voices, some of them were like Italian accents or something. And you're like, I don't know who's talking now. You have no clue. And the only thing I had on my mind was, remember this, I have to say something because the
So they
meeting
know
is,
that you're there.
so they know I'm there. Yeah, exactly. So they know I was part of the meeting, because otherwise I would not have been there,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? They would have not even kind of, were you there? Yes, because hello. So the only thing on my mind was finding an opportunity to say something so they knew I was there, and it had to be smart. So
Yeah.
that
Obviously,
all that
yeah.
matters. And it's still going on a little bit now, obviously, with video conferencing where people don't have their camera on, or even with their camera on.
Hmm.
But it's this interesting thing that, we have these meetings that they don't go anywhere. But at the same time, do you think so? When we talk about facilitation, and we talk about creative leadership, which in a way connects to what I would call facilitative leadership,
Hmm.
right? So creating safe space for people
Hmm.
to also not talk, so right,
Hmm.
and not having to share everything, or just kind of be themselves, or listen, or you know creating those spaces. Is do you feel that if you go back sort of the last whatever 10 years or 15 years, is the role of the facilitator or the facilitative leader, is that changing? Is it growing? Is there something going on that, because I can't remember talking about facilitation, you know, whatever, 10
Hmm.
years ago or so. I never talked about, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
And when we talked about facilitators, we usually meant, the person who took notes,
Hmm. But I think
Question.
uh,
the
um,
moderator.
a moderator existed already before
Yeah.
in the past, right? But a facilitator, which goes beyond moderation, right? It's beyond making sure there's equal participation in conversation, and it is about building that safe space. And I like to even say it is about making sure people make space, that there is space,
Hmm.
but there is a growing interest in it. And I would think that interest in it evolves with the less hierarchical organizational structures we're applying more and more. Like, when people work in these different setups,
Hmm.
tribes, squads, or chapters, or what is it? I don't know. I don't think I know all of them at the moment.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. There are new
Nobody knows.
words
They'll
popping
have
up,
a
and
new
then
hip phrase
oh,
tomorrow.
I got
There,
this serious FOMO happening when people throw these words out on the table. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not with it. I don't know what's going on. But I think in the past, when organizations were more hierarchical, there was
Hmm.
no place for a facilitator. Now, when there is more emphasis on co-creation, there is more emphasis on fluidity, on leveraging diversity. I
Hmm.
think the necessity for facilitation is more clear, and the value of it is perceived also by people in decision-making positions. So I think there's a growing interest, and with the growing interest, there is obviously an evolution of the role itself as well, because as more people facilitate, we're all on a learning curve and we help each other, and the role gets filled in better and better. Well, at least I hope so.
But when did you start thinking about, because, being a
Mhm.
facilitator? Because I remember there was this clear moment, because I mentioned it to my colleague at the time. I remember being in the car and calling her and saying, I think I'm like facilitating or something. And it was for me, it was a new word. And I was like, and I actually also said, I'm not sure if I like it. Because I used to be sort of the creative and do the sort of the creative part, and now all of a sudden I was facilitating other people, and I wasn't doing
Yeah.
it myself. And so, but it was a moment of oh, I'm facilitating people through
Yeah.
a creative process. That's really interesting. Did you have a moment like that? You go like,
Yeah.
facilitation, where you discovered the word and the language?
Well, I didn't know the word back then, but I spent a few years working in hospitality, and I was in a brand management role where I helped hotel teams build a branded experience in hotels. So I had to come from headquarters and visit the hotel teams and support them in building a special guest experience. And I noticed if I would do these one-way presentations just preaching the brand, it's all fun, but it didn't really do anything. It didn't really excite them and didn't really activate them. They would only, you know, execute whatever rules they are given. But then I noticed if it would become a conversation, if they got the space to contribute, if they would be able to create their interpretation of the brand, even build the spaces and the experience from their interpretation, suddenly everybody was 10 times more enthusiastic and
Mm.
way better ideas and executions came out. And I'm talking now about close to, yeah, I think 15 to 20 years ago. Let's say 15 is rather 15. That's the first time I noticed that, hey, wait a minute, if I just build a space, if I hold space and I ask the right questions and I provide a certain type of input, then activating these people in a room actually creates magic. And if I like dull them, is that how you say it? If I could just keep talking about the same thing and they just have to listen to me, nothing happens. It's just me thinking I'm saying all that smart stuff, but when I leave the room, it's gone. So I guess
Yeah.
that's the first time I noticed the power of it. And then when I got into design thinking a lot of years later, I noticed very clearly that facilitation is the key to innovation. And methodology is wonderful. It's a good vehicle, but you need a facilitator to to translate all that stuff to the moment, to the people, to
Mhm.
be able to get to great outcomes. So that's when it really became super clear. Yeah, and then I got biased because I wrote a book about it. So after that, I was preaching facilitation as the thing. And yeah, I also confronted with the fact that it's not only facilitation, right? So hence that second book, I was quite I was overestimating the power of facilitation. Although it is super powerful and very important, a facilitator can't fix everything.
Mm.
So you need to have a willing group of people. Like, if they don't believe in whatever they're doing in that room, they might show you they believe in it because they want to please you as a facilitator, but not, and that's also the big difficulty for organizations, I guess. It's in the execution, in the testing, implementation, and actually
Yeah.
materializing stuff. That's because I noticed after good facilitation, still it didn't really get to the point where I wanted it to go. I noticed there's more is necessary than merely facilitation. You need culture. You need co-creative culture and facilitation together with people that are willing and believe in change together. Then I think you can be very agile and adaptable and all that stuff that organizations want to be in these times. Yeah. Oh, that was a way too long answer, Arne. I'm sorry. I
No,
went way beyond.
No, I'm thinking broad. I'm spacing
I
out.
did. I
Yeah.
stop recording because I no.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm still good. You're still recording.
Yeah, and barely. I was almost, my finger was almost going like, I'm going to cut him. No, of course not. No, it is. Sorry, Morgan, you were. You wanted to respond.
Well, I was just saying that I was thinking broad, and I like what you said, like a facilitator is not going to solve all of that. You know, you need the cooperation and the buy-in and the trust and the willingness from the whole group. And and a great facilitator can, I think, pinpoint, okay, this exists or this doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There's a bigger problem at play.
Yes.
But the
Yes.
facilitator cannot solve that in a session.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've got environmental things happening. I mean, you've got a
Mhm.
culture you're dealing with. You've got reporting lines with maybe friction on it. You have,
Hmm.
all
Hmm.
those dynamics that happen in an organization. You can't fix it. You can create a sub-reality. I'm sure of that. As a facilitator, you can create a different reality in a room. But when the session ends and the door is closed, that sub-reality vanishes.
Yeah.
And so does all the good stuff that came from that because they're confronted again with the environment they're working in.
Mm.
Yeah. But you're exactly right. You can point it out. As a good facilitator will, before they even start with their session, point out these are the potential risks you're facing because this and this exists in the organization.
Mm.
Just be conscious of it. And often it's a smart thing to do just to make sure that you don't get your fingers pointed at you as a facilitator, that you failed with the session while you already knew up front, like it's going to be a hard one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's always everything's kind of depending on your preparation, I think. If
Hmm.
you have did you talk to the right people? Do you know what's going
Hmm.
on? Do you know what they expect? Do you
Yeah.
know what are the things they already done? You know, what kind of experiences did they already have? All those kind of things. There can be little traps for facilitator. They're like, oh, wait a minute. They're expecting something completely different. Yeah. Or having sort of meetings. I did a session once where just before they started, the sort of the most senior person who was going to, typically in a lot of these workshops, there's a senior person kicking off saying how important the session is going to be, and then they leave. That's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, this is really important. It's amazing important. Okay, goodbye.
Yeah.
And anyway, but I had one where this senior person came in to kick off the workshop, but he also had an announcement to make because he had to kind of share some information. There was a meeting with the senior executives, and that it wasn't going really well with the business, so some of the contracts wouldn't be renewed. And he said that, and I was like, okay. And we were, it was at the start of it,
Just about to begin. Yeah.
a 2-day workshop. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh.
people traveled to get to the workshop. Yeah, I was in somewhere in Manhattan, and people traveled from all kinds of countries. I traveled to the
Yeah.
US 2 days with people, and so I actually literally I stopped the workshop. I said,
Yeah.
we're not going to do it. We're going to talk about this first because there was so much tension and questions, and people were like, oh, who's going to lose their job? And
Yeah.
I was like, you can't do it. But I didn't know he was going to do that, and I should have known. I don't know if I could have,
Yeah.
but if I would have known, I wouldn't have. First of all, I would have said, don't do
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
don't do it. Wait until I've done my my stuff, and then make them really unhappy.
I had that same I had that same situation also with a manager coming in and doing the intro and then leaving again. And at that point, I didn't sense that there was some type of tension, strangely. But he was also just doing the introduction pretty briefly. And then we spent 2 days coming up with completely new ideas. And these were engineer type people. So once they finally felt comfortable to think out of the box, all the ideas came out. It took a while to get beyond their structured way of thinking, but then suddenly these wonderful things came out, and I kind of I pushed it a little bit here and there where I could. I pushed them over the edge just to think big or completely different. They were enjoying it. And I was thinking, this is going to be such a great outcome. And also think that this manager that did the intro is going to be so happy. So he came in again to listen to all the ideas. Not even half of them were presented. And I kept nudging the engineers like, hey, but what about this? What about that? They didn't say it. They really tried to hide it because they were too scared to actually suggest something that was that much out of the box. Too scared. And I only noticed that by the end of the workshop. And obviously it was devastating for the outcomes. Half of the good stuff, never went anywhere. So preparation is everything, but sometimes it's really hard to detect those
Yeah.
subtle things that are happening in the culture. People don't show it. No one's going to tell you, no. And
Well, because they often don't even really realize it
yeah,
themselves, right? So
Or just,
they
they don't
live
talk
it
about
right
it.
every day. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
yeah,
don't talk about it.
yeah.
So yeah, but as a facilitator, in a way, and this is something that is really interesting, and depending on your position as a facilitator, and also kind of the role that you can take if you want to, but it's dangerous. That's the moment to step in
Yeah.
Yeah.
as well, to say, hang on, stop,
Yeah.
because but it's, you know, there's so many things where you're like, especially if you're not at experience, or if you really need the job, or or you
Yeah.
want to you don't want to kind of hurt the relationship with the client, or it's so difficult, and it's
Oh,
in that
it is.
moment, to go like, okay, stop. I've stopped workshops, but it, but when but it really has to be very extreme. I mean, people really have to get into like, I mean, I had workshops where people got into fights, where like almost physical, where when like, oh, hang on, stop, what's going on? So I felt there
Yeah.
was a bit of a, interesting energy, but what's happening? And they were like, no, but just before you guys came in, we had a fight, and we were, we said, we'll take care of it after the workshop. Like, oh, I was like, okay, that's explained, because I always blamed myself when I started facilitation. Every time something happened, or there was like low energy, or there was something going on, I thought it was my fault. I thought I was doing something wrong, and I was sort of trying to fix it without
Mm.
saying it. And then I've learned to say it, and to say, hey, I mean, can I make an observation? I'm noticing this. Anyone else? And then usually people will go like, oh yeah, right, yeah. Oh, you've noticed. Yeah, true. And you're like, oh, wait, it wasn't me, right? Because you have your antennas, right? You kind of
Yeah.
sense
Hmm.
that. That's where and that, when that's your zoning out
Mm.
thing, where you start
Hmm.
noticing these things. But you have to learn also that the things that you have to kind of know that you're picking up on things that you notice,
Mhm.
energy, kind of this vibe in a room. You have to learn that, to recognize these signs
Yeah.
as
Also the red flags, right?
yeah, as
Yeah.
red flags, that you actually see them, and
Yeah.
because you've noticed them, but you never saw them, and you have to learn as a facilitator, like, oh, wait a minute, oh,
Yeah.
that's not
Seen this
me.
before. Yeah.
It's in the
Yeah.
room. I have to say it.
Well, what I find really hardest is when they kind of use your skills against you. Well, maybe I'm
Oh,
saying it
shoot.
the wrong way, but it's when,
Oh,
you know,
damn it.
I have these wonderful people that I've worked with, and they noticed after the first workshop I did with them that there was quite some impact from a facilitator. And as a good facilitator, you're able to change people's minds. Even from the beginning, they might be opposed. With a good facilitator, he or she can be sure to get everybody in the same, noses in the same direction, and deciding on what needs to be decided upon. And when they notice that, they're like, oh, but wait a minute. So what if I want them to decide this? Can you make that happen? And that's where facilitation gets on the verge of manipulation, right? And
Yeah.
would you do that? Would you not do that? Because yes, you can design a workshop to make people believe anything you want. You just put the spotlight on certain information, you have them think about it in a certain way, and you kind of give the stage to certain type of people, and you kind of moderate it in such a way that they'll end up with a certain decision. It is definitely possible, but
Yeah.
it's not ethical. I mean, and if you're asked to do that, why do you do? You have to decide as a facilitator, is it safe, not safe? Is it fair? Am I completely for open co-creation and I do not want to bias them in any way? But on the other hand, it's part of the briefing. And where's the line? I think that's a really interesting.
Yeah, it
Uh,
is.
uh,
Well, it's difficult also. I mean, that's difficult, but also sometimes, I mean, don't you sometimes have you have you have a group of people, and they're working on this they have to come up with new ideas or something, and there's something on your mind. You go like, I have a great idea.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have a great idea. Because I'm a creative. I come up with
yeah.
ideas,
Just
and I go
put an
like,
energy
I
bar in your mouth, right? That's lying around,
I was like, I have a
and
great
do it.
idea. I have a great idea. I will sometimes just go up to someone. You go like, what about if you do this?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
did you look at that thing? Look at that post-it there. That's really interesting.
yeah,
Isn't that an interesting
yeah, yeah.
post-it right
Look,
there?
look.
Yeah, that's
Did
an
you really see
inside.
it?
No, no, I don't know. I'm just saying it could be. I don't know. It's gonna be like
Or like play
that's
around with the
manipulation,
concept.
right?
Yeah, play around with the concept of open questions, like asking them certain trigger questions, and then just
Yeah,
get rid of your guilt because hey, you didn't say it. You
yeah.
just
It's just I'm just asking questions, But I would sometimes do that because there's something right in front of them and they don't see
yeah,
it, right?
Yeah.
And you go like, it's right there. It's right there. You don't see it. So I'll do nudge them a little bit, you
But I
know.
think, yeah, I think getting someone to see something and then they have the decision if they don't see it or like if they take it forward or not is
Yeah.
still on a different degree than, okay, let's get them all agreeing with the same thing.
yeah. Yeah, although I did experience that once, and that's why I'm a bit cautious with suggesting stuff after that.
Mm,
The group was lost. They didn't see the solution anymore. They were looking for their purpose within the organization, what their contribution can be. And I noticed what it could be, and it matched their skills perfectly. And I can't say what it is because then it's too obvious who it is about, and it's so I'm just gonna keep it very general. But I for me it was crystal clear, like that's what they can, that's their added value. Why don't they see it? It's like the perfect thing. And then I started mentioning it. I said, but what about this? And it felt like they didn't understand. It felt like they just didn't get what I wanted to say. So I repeated it and I repeated it again. But what I didn't know back then is that they were actually ignoring me because they didn't want to do that. Or even though it was the most value, they didn't want to have that role. But I didn't know. But I thought it's so obvious that this is how they can add value. So I kept repeating it to the point where I lost their trust. I noticed that I lost control of the situation, and we're with two facilitators, and I felt like when I said stuff, I didn't have that much impact anymore because I was the one who kept, nagging about a certain thing that nobody wanted to do, and it was very subtle because I didn't notice it at the beginning, but whew, that was a good lesson for me, a big learning.
Yeah, true.
there's
Yeah.
so much psychology with
Oh,
facilitation as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
I like
absolutely.
the sort of the things I mean, it's like, I don't know why I like that the most, but obviously I like, so no, I should rephrase it. When you facilitate, workshop process or whatever, and and something comes out and it really helps and you have great impact, that's obviously that's the goal and that's what I want. But sometimes what I sometimes really enjoy is that when I facilitate sessions and the outcome is so kind of not what they want, but it's right. There's no escape. We did a work, and it's not my fault. It's clearly not me. It's them saying
It's
it.
their fault, right?
Yeah. So we did a workshop, and yeah. So it was actually some. I think I can say this. It was about a new embassy in London, Dutch embassy in London. and and so we had the ambassador, we had a group of people, so a really senior group of people from the ministry in our session, and but the result was that embassies are really outdated. A real functional it makes no sense to have an embassy in London. That was actually the outcome of the workshop, because yeah, there was some, you might need some kind of office for people who lose their passport or something, but the communication was really between governments directly and not through embassies anymore. You don't do that, so it makes no
Yeah,
sense. And so,
they were
and so
redundant.
well, so there was one person in the room. He was responsible, and which he already did, for buying the sort of the space for buying where they would build the sort of the land where they would build the embassy, and he already bought it. And he said, "Well, that's interesting because we just
What?
spent X amount of
Yeah.
money
What else
buying this
can we do?
lot," and and I was like,
Yeah. Yeah. You could
so,
have sold them a next session. Hey, next one is the ideation, what we could do with the land.
yeah, what can we do with this plot of land? It's really, I somehow, yeah, because sometimes it's also like because they come up, and I wasn't manipulating it. It was just the way, and I
Yeah.
kind of knew it was going that way, but I knew it also because they had the courage to then
Yeah.
say it out loud and to say, yeah, something that's actually makes no sense. And I had, so those sessions are because they reveal something that is true but uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
still it's being revealed, and I kind of like that. Although
Yeah.
the embassy's there, so it didn't solve
That was
because
my next
Yeah.
question.
yeah, because there's no way back. There was no way back, and for all kinds of reasons. But just that, I like that if you are as a facilitator, you are able to kind of uncover things
Yeah.
that are real and are painful, but they're true, and you can do it in a way that nobody's angry. It's just they all discover it at the same time. All of
Do
them
you,
went like, "Oh,
do you feel that that sometimes could also keep people from deciding to have workshops or
totally,
co-creation?
totally." Of course, that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
one of the main reasons why not
Yeah.
to have gatherings of people and giving them space to talk and
The lack of
Yeah.
share.
control, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
micromanagers will not like this.
Yeah.
No, of
Yeah. I
course.
Yeah.
noticed that.
It's a risk. It's a risk. Yeah. Because you know it before you go into it somewhere deep inside of you or not so deep. You know it. You know it. It
Yeah.
makes no sense. Every time you go in a workshop, people are way more, they're ahead of you because especially if they work, if there's a team, you as an outsider, you get into a project as a facilitator, they know so much more. They know. This is one of the things that you'll also have noticed, obviously, as a facilitator, where people go, well, we can do this workshop, especially when it's just a workshop, just, there's no follow-up or anything. There's no real
Right.
purpose. That people go like, boom, nothing will happen, with
Yeah.
these ideas anyway, right?
Yeah.
So that sense of, well, just have some fun in the workshop, but, they're not going to implement this because they don't want this. Right.
That's something.
That's what you
Yeah.
just, in a way, what you just said, your
Yeah.
anecdote about people not sharing their real ideas because they knew, there's just more dangerous for them to share it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Because, nothing's going to happen anyway.
And
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to like the culture, it's not just facilitation and their ability, but also about the culture, right? And that is what would be revealed in this kind of situation that Arne is
Yes.
talking about, right? Like they know that this is a silly idea, but for whatever reason, that culture is preventing that conversation from happening somehow. And one of the
I,
most like groundbreaking questions we asked, we got this on like an article from like Harvard Business Review or something, and we asked one of the teams we were facilitating, what is something your team does not talk about enough?
Hmm.
And we thought that we would get like simple enough answers, and that blew the lid right off. And we discovered so much that we were not anticipating, and it was so fascinating. Yeah, there's always layers.
there's always layers. And I even think it's a good exercise for anybody in senior management or even C-level to sometimes just take part in a couple of workshops because it really shows you immediately the culture in your organization. Of course, if you're able to create this equal participation and people don't see you as senior management or CEO and hold back, but if there is this space created where everybody just acts as a participant, the culture just comes out immediately. And that's why it's also such a fascinating role to take on, especially if you do it external and you can
Mhm.
do a lot of facilitation across different companies and industries. You just get so much experience. You get exposed to so many different types of cultures and way of collaborations and see the red threads, like see the stuff that they're all struggling with, it's so interesting to notice. There's a lot of psychology behind it. Unfortunately, there's also often a lot of fear still in organizations,
Mhm.
a lot of fear. these organizations that we have, although we're evolving, a lot of them are still built on control. And from that control comes fear, obviously, because if there is control, that means that you're evaluated, that you should do what you're supposed to do, that, and then also,
Yeah.
are you meeting up the requirements compared to your peers? And that creates fear. And that comes through in a workshop just like that. Even without people noticing, as a facilitator, an experienced facilitator, you would immediately know what the dynamics are and what the culture is like. Yeah.
Yeah, just now imagine being a facilitator with a team that has to be kind of creative and innovative in the US.
Yeah.
Imagine that, where,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, where people go like,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Nah, we'll just wait for another 3, 4 years.
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
also, I mean, I don't know if we'll share this in the podcast, but the pre-conversation we were having with Alvin was how Belgium has this more creative edge somehow that's apparent in things than the Netherlands.
Mhm.
But I was also,
Yeah,
Dangerous statement. I'm sure not all Dutch people agree with that. All Belgians
I'm
will.
sure I'll hear from them. Yeah. Well, we were reflecting on this, but I was also thinking, like, what are the conditions that bring creativity about? And I think when there are hardships or there are difficulties or there are these constraints, like, because I'm also thinking of the United
mhm.
States, which is my troubled homeland that I love so much. But of course, there's going to be this fear, but I think it's also going to kind of like push creativity out through the cracks in other ways. And it will kind of grow up sideways in ways we don't expect. And of course, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and we
yeah.
have quite a lot of listeners in the US, by the way.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
Hello.
so next to the Netherlands, it's the biggest group. No, totally. I think you're right. I think every movement has a counter movement. Yeah, no, totally. I think it
And
is
so, yeah. But then also,
absolutely.
like in terms of facilitation, right? If you have a leadership or a manager who walks in the room and the whole atmosphere changes and people are afraid to speak up.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had that at can I? I'm not sure if I can mention the company that Alwin also did some work for, Dutch company, and we did a session and a 3 day session. I think it was 3 days with designers, and they came from all over the world. And because we found out that you can actually get designers from different departments together for a creative workshop, and it was sort of an interesting kind of a loophole in the system, because it you didn't have to kind of go through your manager to ask if you can collaborate on a specific project if you just did a creative session with designers. So we had this 3 day session, and it was great. And a lot of people, a lot of posters, a lot of markers, a lot of stuff and prototyping and things. And then the people started presenting, and there was one moment, it was a big room, and people were in front of the room presenting ideas, and everybody was sort of in a circle, a semicircle around these people. And in the back of the room, everybody's kind of, nobody could see this person entering. Door opened, two people came in, and I saw my client kind of, his face went all pale, and and he sneaked to this person. He's like, "Okay, yes, yes, yes," and he sneaked to the person who was presenting, and because there was this really senior person coming into the room, and everybody went, "Oh," and everything changed. Horrible. I was like, who cares? And like, no,
Yeah.
Arne, no, no. So, you know, don't talk to this person, Arne.
Don't look at them.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Don't look him in the eye. Move back slowly. It was
But
really weird. That happens, right? And yeah,
that happens. And also, I think everything that is rigid will eventually be disrupted and
Mhm.
probably will be broken down. It is really hard to evolve something that is rigid. It's a bit sad because we built these wonderful big things, but if they're rigid and you want to then make it more adaptable from the inside, it is hard because it's just built on control. And
Yeah.
trying to go away from control with something that's built on control is nearly impossible. So, yes, there are cracks, and yes, creativity happens, but it's always outside. Within that control, there's just no space. There's no
exactly.
space. And you can try and make space, but it's impossible. And the reason why I say it is because, that second book is called How to Make Space for Creativity and Co-Creation. And I thought that was a really important concept to write about, because in all the organizations where there was a high level of control, they all had innovation departments. They all were very busy with design thinking and agile and lean and all these methodologies. There was no space. They made no progress. And they tried to
Mm.
centralize, decentralize, create all these kinds of different approaches to try and bring innovation in that organization of control. It never succeeded. Because there is no capability to make space, which means you are just repeating the knowns because it's familiar, it's safe. There's no space for the unknowns. There's no space for prototyping, testing, implementing new stuff. No space. So when you talk about creativity going through the cracks, it is the cracks that, pour that creativity outside that organization and happens on the side. People or leave, or they're going to do stuff on the sides or as an incubator, or that's where it then happens,
Yeah.
which is a shame, all those
Yeah.
investments, time and energy and innovation.
Well,
Well, if you already notice there's no space, you just stop what you're doing. Just
but
keep,
yeah,
yeah,
but on a sort of some kind of a higher level, if you kind of zoom out, zone out and zoom out, you you know, yeah, if you look at one individual company, you go like, that's such a shame, because there's so much creativity there and you're just losing it. But at the same time, if you kind of zoom out and you look at sort of society as a whole and all these companies in it, you see this movement happening. And you might not feel so bad about this one company that's just not
yeah,
getting it, but because these people are leaving and they're doing other things,
other
right?
things. Yeah,
Because creativity, you can't stop it.
yeah,
It's going to happen anyway,
yeah,
right?
Hmm.
Remember Kodak was probably
yes,
the most known brand on the planet. Everybody
Yeah.
knew Kodak, right? And it collapsed. But these people didn't disappear. They started doing
mhm,
other things. It's not
yeah,
like you can go like, oh, it's such a sad, this company, terrible, horrible. And yeah, people also lost their job, sure, but things kind of, also
mm,
happened again because it disappeared, this creative destruction kind of, right? So it is destruction. You need
yeah,
sometimes chaos, it's for
yeah,
new patterns to be able to emerge and new things to happen. I think that's what we're observing. I think we're
absolutely.
observing the end of a system that is
Yeah.
fighting back because it's the end of the system,
Hmm.
and there's something new emerging, and that is so interesting. And I think, maybe not just facilitators, but people who are able to step back and see patterns.
Yeah,
Hmm.
We are pattern recognizers as human beings, obviously, but if you're really aware of that, and if you're able to say, hey, look, what's really happening, you can see it. You can see there's all kinds of new things emerging. And, no
yeah.
matter how much they fight it, it's going to happen. So,
Hmm.
I also, well, we people build stuff, right? So if things change, it's because we build different things. And if people change, the world changes. It's not the other way around. It's not suddenly something new exists and the people change. It's the people change, they build new things. And I think you see it on a micro level as well. People get burnouts from old systems because they had no space. They had to do the same thing all over and over and over again, even with little appreciation. They just bled dry. You might say they had a burnout, and then they step out of that hamster wheel and they start creating space in their lives. They start doing other things, more creative things, and suddenly they're part of a generation that starts building new things. They start building new type of organizations, new type of collaborations. So I think people are also becoming more conscious, and people
Yeah.
are one by one stepping out of those systems, because sometimes it's a conscious decision, but sometimes also because they can't anymore physically. And then they
Hmm.
get into a new lifestyle, but the new lifestyle allows for completely new things to emerge. So if we facilitate co-creation amongst a different type of people, you'll get different types of organizations, different type of world in the end. So I agree. Yeah.
cool.
I
Let's,
wish we could like invite the people who have had burnout reawakenings or just
Yes.
reawakenings. It
Yeah.
doesn't always have to come through burnout, but I wish that we could bring these people who are maybe a little more open to doing things in non-traditional ways and bring them into the workshops with the super traditional
Right.
suits. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
they might just get these associations from the past, and they might just want to leave as quick as they can.
He too
Yeah.
used to be a successful lawyer, and now he
Yeah,
runs his own yogurt store.
exactly.
oh boy, yeah. It's interesting, right? How you I don't know, do you find your place in the world as well? Also, for us as well, because as creatives or facilitators or trainers or educators or what have you, if you, it's also you have to you also have to fit into the system that is here right now, right?
Hmm.
I can see new systems emerging, but there's also the current system which is not that great, and I have to also fit into that system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a sometimes.
Well, we've got an important role to play. I think it's all in transition, clearly. And
Hmm.
there's new stuff arising every day. And then everybody's also fearful of well, not everybody. Some people are fearful of the future because, will AI take over our jobs? What if we have a totally different way of working? Will I still be valued? Will I still matter or not? So that means if people think that kind of existential fear that things are changing, we're in the midst of transition. So that means that our place is probably helping with that transition as well as we can. And that is going to be helping a bit of the old to try and see a bit of the new and helping a bit of the new to not, go overboard and do stuff in a sustainable way. That's probably what we need to do. It's
And
just hard to see where, where is the need, where there's so
yeah,
much going on.
one of the so I actually studied facilitation and kind of like systemic facilitation. And one of the biggest needs is to be able to facilitate across multi-stakeholders.
Yeah.
Because a company can come in and say, oh, yeah, we want this. But if you're trying to transition, I don't know, with a lot of different people who want a lot of different things,
Yeah.
and that's kind of adding the next element. But
Yeah.
I think it's all, I mean, no matter how we transition in life and as a society, we're going to need connection with each other, and facility is essentially enabling that. So
Yeah.
I think facilitators are in a very good space, even if the rest of the world doesn't realize it yet.
Well, yeah, I guess you're completely right, but people are in different, at the moment, they're in different life situations and different ways of looking at the world, sometimes completely different. Ones
Hmm.
believe in completely different things than others. You got polarization happening, and you need facilitation to do systems facilitation and make sure everybody stays connected and there's not too much polarizing so you don't get conflicts. Facilitation has an important role to keep stuff constructive and leverage that diversity without judgments. And that is such a hard exercise. I must say,
Yeah.
don't judge Trump. He's part of the time and he's probably absolutely necessary. So we also need to leverage that. Don't judge certain things that you might not completely understand or might be completely the opposite of what you think should be happening because they're all necessary. And the facilitator embraces all of that and is able to, get the synergy out of it. Yeah, it's super important. You would see that interview with Zelensky. The first thing I thought was, where's the facilitator? Can we ever live in a world where the first thought is, with those important moments, we need a facilitator? Who's the
Mhm.
best facilitator in the world? Put them there. Make sure that that person, that everybody can speak their mind and that things go in a constructive way. Why is there no facilitator? Yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right.
Great
Yeah.
example. Yeah. Great example.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question. I have two questions. One, I have one that I actually wanted to ask you this way earlier, but so I was doubting if I to do it because it's going back to the sort of the first bit of this interview or conversation is that the first thing you said about the kind of person you are is that you I'm not sure the words you used, but you are at your best amongst people
Yeah, within groups.
within groups, right? And so that kind of, I wrote it down and I wanted to ask you about this, but I just wanted to know because it's about you as a person. When, when was the moment that you realized that? Were you as a kid? Were you already that way? Were you already were you a little tiny little
He's like,
facilitator?
No,
he's
no,
a
no,
team
that's
manager for his football
Yes,
team. Yeah.
yes.
this was a tough realization and a tough piece of growth journey in my life, and I'm sure several people can personify or relate to this. I'm at core more of an introvert. I'm a bit sensitive, which means because of that sensitivity, I can read a room easily. I pick up emotions really quickly of people. Already from a young age, I picked up emotions, started asking questions like, why does that person feel like that? And how does that reflect on me? And did I do something? And that was already in quite an early age. And well, I guess that's common knowledge now that the best facilitators are introverts because of that sensitivity. Even though you might think that the best facilitators are extroverts because they need to be expressive and they need to be able to give good instructions, for example, and be very clear in their messaging. But that sensitivity is key. And I noticed that instead of having that sensitivity and introvertness that actually made being surrounded by a lot of people or in groups very tiring for me, and instead of having that work against me, I noticed it is a superpower. I noticed I can actually create deeper connections with people because I sensed more early on what is in their mind, how they felt before they even expressed it. That was obviously not in my teenage years. It took a while for me to properly get that. I think it's rather in my mid 20s, and I think I've got a proper understanding of it rather mid 30s. So it really took a while. Now I'm completely at peace with it, and I'm also at peace with the facilitators hangover, which I'm not sure
That
if
was my
everybody.
question. That was
Yeah,
my next question. As an introvert, which I also identify as, how do you deal with big
yeah.
groups of people? If,
I'm
yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people know it is as well, this feeling. I'm completely in tune with the group, which I need to be able to get it to a good outcome, but that just exhausts the hell out of me. So 2 or 3 days workshop and the day after, because then the focus is gone, right? In the 3 days I can keep it because I need to be focused and the
yeah.
adrenaline probably works and the norepinephrine. But after that is, I can't do anything the day after. And I try to, but I can't. I need to recover.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They do
Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone
suck all
with
the
this.
yeah, me too. They suck all the energy out of you. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, interesting.
It's a good
Lots of
sign, though. So it's a sign that you care and you give it all you had. You gave it all you
Yeah,
had, and you
yeah.
really
yeah,
helped them. So,
And I think it should also be a call to maybe other people who think, oh, I'm not the star of the show. I'm not the extrovert. I can never be a good facilitator.
oof, no.
Actually, you'd probably be our best facilitator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If you're an extrovert, you're great as well, but you need to just make sure you keep in tune with the
yeah,
people around you. You're not just wanting to express yourself, but you actually create and hold a space, which is much harder for an extrovert.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know a lot of extroverts who are facilitators, to be quite
No,
honest.
exactly. No, me neither.
I know a lot of people I thought of as extroverts, and then after talking to them, knew they all said the same.
Yeah.
I'm really an introvert. And you're like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah,
true.
yeah,
I
yeah.
only realized for myself a few years ago that I was an introvert. And that, because I'm not shy. I can talk to anybody. So everyone's like, "Oh, you're an extrovert." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then I had this realization. I was like, "Oh, big, yeah.
It's where you
Yeah,
get your energy from, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
small groups
true.
by myself." Yeah.
yeah. There was a
Yeah.
second question, Arne, no? Is it?
Yeah, that's my last question because we've been talking for a long time. And my second question is, and we can talk forever. And but my second question was actually so my last question is, what are you looking forward to? What is the thing that you really, yeah, what are you really looking forward to?
Well, and that's pretty recent, right? And I haven't yet built anything for myself in that direction, or I haven't taken a lot of steps in that direction, but I want to broaden up my facilitation beyond corporate environments. I want to see whether, I couldn't invest my facilitation skills more in helping with that transition, whether it is sustainability. There are so many things that at the moment need facilitation. So I'm just looking forward to seeing the opportunities there, get a different kind of impact, not only within a business environment. So that's what I look forward to. I hope I can make that happen. I built a board game related to the second book and now building a card game. And that's like a new alley I've turned into, like a new door I've opened. And I seem to enjoy building and delivering games more than doing training. And I think that's something I'm going to explore a bit more. I really like that idea of people figuring out insights themselves through a form of a game. Because you know what? I noticed that they naturally deeply connect with each other if they're in a game. And that I didn't really think about that before. But if you create a fun type of activity, like a game, and they get sucked into the storytelling and all the little pieces of it, suddenly they start laughing with each other and having fun, and their roles drop off or drop out. I don't know how to say it. They don't have any titles anymore. They're just, part of the game. And that was so powerful when I noticed that. I thought I need to do a lot more of this. And the world needs to have light messaging and fun and playfulness. Where's the joy? Sometimes, there need to be a lot more joy and learning and connecting and not all that seriousness because we're all wrong. We don't know it. We don't have it figured out. We're all guessing. So what's the point of
Sometimes I,
sticking to statements?
sometimes I like to play the game with myself. What will I realize in 60 years I was so wrong about now?
Exactly. Probably everything.
Yes.
So why it's all a game anyway, as long as there is respect, integrity, joy, connection, those are the important things. So I think I'm going to invest a bit more in that. That's what I look forward to. Yeah.
Really cool.
Sounds like a good ending. Yeah. What's the point? We're all wrong anyway. Let's
Right.
enjoy the ride.
Let's
Enjoy
play
the ride,
games.
people. Yeah, exactly. Let's play games. And you're right. You're totally right. Good. That's nice. That's inspirational. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you very much for this.
Let us
Thank
know when the
you.
game is finished. We'll play.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Next time we'll play the game on the podcast.
There's podcasts that do that. We can do that. Okay.
I'm up for it. I'm up for it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Ending here. Okay. Thank you, Alvin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
Yes,
It was
thank
a
you so
really
much.
fun conversation.